All right, so today we're going to really dig into an absolute classic,
Wow.
George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Big one.
It is a big one, and we've got a pretty good chunk of the book to get through, too.
Yeah.
We've got chapters 1 through 8, and then jumping all the way to chapter 10.
Okay.
And basically, our mission for today is to kind of really trace that, that initially very inspiring vision
Yeah.
of the animal rebellion, and then sort of follow it down the path it ultimately takes.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at this selection of chapters because it is that turning point.
Yeah.
It's that moment where things go from maybe hopeful and revolutionary to
Yeah.
something a lot darker.
Yeah, it's a powerful narrative about how ideals can get twisted and and really sort of fall apart. So let's just jump right in with chapter 1
Okay.
and an Old Major's speech. I mean, it's such a pivotal moment in the whole book.
Huge.
So picture the scene, right? Mr. Jones, the farmer, he's had a bit too much to drink and he's completely out of it. And he's even forgotten to lock up the hen houses.
Oh.
So this brings all the animals together in the barn. And I love how Orwell paints this picture of like all the different personalities there, right? You've got Boxer and Clover, these powerful part horses being super careful not to step on anyone. Then you've got the sneaky cat just looking for like the warmest spot and totally ignoring the old pig.
Right.
And even the rats are kind of scurrying around.
Yeah.
One interesting thing is that Moses, the tame raven who usually kind of hangs around, is noticeably absent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that setting is so key, right? It's not just Jones's neglect being a detail. It's really like the catalyst for everything.
Totally.
And the fact that he brings together such a diverse group of animals already kind of hints at all the different levels of understanding and the investment they're going to have in this rebellion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Some are going to be much more into it than others.
Totally.
So anyway, Old Major gets up and, he doesn't really mince words.
Right.
He's like, look, guys, our lives are miserable.
Yeah.
They're laborious. They're short.
Yeah.
We're basically kept alive only to be exploited, and then we face a grim end.
Yeah.
He even gives these really affecting examples, right? Like Clover's foals being sold.
Yeah.
Boxer, just being sent off to the knacker's yard once he's past his prime.
Brutal.
Yeah. Unwanted dogs just being drowned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really stark picture of their reality.
It is, and what I think is so interesting is that Old Major, he doesn't just describe the situation.
Yeah.
He really goes to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
And he says, England is a rich country. We could all have enough.
Right.
But the problem, he says, is man.
Yeah.
He's the only one who consumes without producing.
Yeah.
He just takes and takes and takes and gives back only enough to keep us alive.
It's interesting how he presents man as like the singular enemy.
Right.
Get rid of man and suddenly problem solved.
Yeah.
But he goes even beyond that. He's not just identifying the enemy.
Right.
He lays out these incredibly specific principles for after the rebellion happens.
Okay.
So no living in houses, no sleeping in beds, no wearing clothes, no alcohol, no smoking, no handling money, no engaging in trade. And really crucially, no animal should ever tyrannize over another animal.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a big one. And all of this boils down to that one, like, really fundamental principle.
Yeah.
Absolute equality. All animals are equal.
Right.
I mean, even at this point, I think it's interesting to sort of think about how absolute some of these rules are. Like, do you think there are any ambiguities in how they're framed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even in these initial, this sort of pure vision,
Yeah.
it seems like there's already some room for interpretation that could get pretty tricky later on.
Right. Like, what exactly constitutes wearing clothes?
Right.
What's a bed, really?
Yeah.
And that big one, right? All animals are equal. I mean, it's such a powerful idea.
Absolutely.
But what does equality actually mean in practice?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So anyway, Old Major's not done yet. He wants to give them something to really, really remember this by.
Yeah.
So he teaches them a song.
Oh, Beasts of England?
Yes, Beasts of England. And it's interesting how he describes it. He says, he remembers the tune and the first few lines from his youth. And it's something like a cross between Clementine and La Cucaracha.
Okay.
So you can imagine it's like this,
Catchy tune.
yeah, catchy, singable tune.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are really powerful, too. They paint this incredibly vivid picture of a future where man is overthrown and animals are finally free.
Okay.
They talk about things like cruel rings being torn from their noses,
Yeah.
harnesses being tossed aside, abundance in the fields. I mean, just this incredible vision of freedom.
And how do the animals react to this?
Oh, they love it. I mean, they're completely energized. They sing it like 5 times in a row.
Wow.
Until, unfortunately, Mr. Jones is woken up by all the commotion,
Oh, no.
and he fires a shot from his bedroom window, sending everyone scattering.
That's such a, I mean, it's almost comical, but it also like really underscores how fragile this hope is right now.
Yeah, it's this reminder of like that the old order is still very much in power.
Right.
Um, One other detail I love about that scene is it says, even Benjamin the donkey,
Okay.
who was like notoriously cynical and jaded, even he seems to be humming the tune a little bit.
Wow.
So, it's clearly a song that has this incredible power to unite even the most skeptical of the animals.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of like a song being so contagious, even Benjamin can't help but
Yeah.
be swept up in it. It really shows how deeply this idea of liberation is resonating.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so fast forward a bit, we get to chapter 2.
Okay.
Old Major passes away peacefully a few nights later, but, his ideas, they haven't died with him.
Right.
There's this underground movement starting to kind of bubble up on the farm.
Okay.
And 3 pigs in particular, Snowball, Napoleon, and Squealer, they emerge as the real intellectual leaders.
Okay.
The pigs who are actually going to try to organize this discontent into something real.
So these are the pigs that are going to kind of take Old Major's spark and try to like hammer it into
Turn it into a system.
the system, yeah.
Yeah. And it's an interesting dynamic between those 3, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got Snowball, who is this like really energetic, innovative thinker.
Okay.
Then you've got Napoleon, who's a lot quieter,
Yeah.
much more calculating and seems to really focus on power.
Interesting.
And then Squealer, who is like this master of rhetoric.
Yeah.
He can twist words to fit whatever purpose he needs.
Wow. So that's quite a trio.
Yeah, they're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
So they start holding these secret meetings in the barn every night after Mr. Jones is asleep.
Okay.
And they're trying to bring the other animals on board with this idea of rebellion.
Right.
But it's not easy. There's a lot of apathy, right? Some of the animals still have this like ingrained loyalty to, Master Jones, as they call him. And others just raise these concerns that are like less than revolutionary, shall we say.
Less concerned with the big picture.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for example, Molly, the vain white mare, her immediate question is, will there still be sugar after the rebellion?
Oh, wow.
And will she still be allowed to wear ribbons in her mane?
Really missing the point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And Snowball has to be like, no, Molly's.
Yeah.
There will be no sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Those ribbons are literally symbols of your slavery.
Yeah.
Freedom is so much more valuable than those things.
Right.
And it's interesting because I think that exchange really shows the ideological battle that the pigs are fighting.
Totally.
It's not just against humans. It's against these like ingrained habits and desires within their own community.
Right. And I think it's important to note that at this stage, they're not offering individual rewards.
Right.
It's all about collective improvement.
Yeah.
It's all about
Really sticking to those principles, at least for now.
for now.
So then we get to the actual rebellion itself, and it all happens really fast.
Okay.
Mr. Jones is, like I said, kind of on a downward spiral at this point. He's lost a lawsuit. He's drinking heavily. He's completely neglecting the farm.
Neglecting his duties.
Yeah. And the animals are severely underfed. I mean, they're literally starving.
Wow.
So looking back, harnesses, bits, nose rings, whips, even the ribbons that used to adorn the horses' manes.
No, wow.
They throw it all down the well or into a bonfire, and they're singing Beasts of England louder than ever before. It's this incredible act of defiance.
It's so symbolic.
Yeah, it's incredibly symbolic. What do you think it tells us about how they understand their oppression at this point?
I think it shows that they have this really clear grasp of the tangible tools of their enslavement.
Right.
Right. So by destroying those objects, they're symbolically breaking free from those physical constraints.
Yeah, it's a real rejection of the past.
Absolutely.
So then they even venture into the farmhouse, which is theirs now.
Okay.
But there's this initial hesitation,
Right.
almost like fear as they kind of tiptoe through the rooms.
It's like forbidden territory.
Totally.
Yeah.
But they pretty quickly come to this unanimous decision that they want to preserve it as a museum,
Okay.
like a reminder of the oppressive past.
Right.
Except, of course, for Molly, who is caught admiring herself with ribbons in front of a mirror. Yeah, again, showing where her priorities still lie.
Right.
And then there's also the very practical matter of the hams and the beer, which are just disposed of.
Yeah.
But yeah, that moment with Molly just feels significant.
It really does. It's like this little this little flashing warning sign,
Yeah.
about her attachment to
Yeah.
these superficial comforts.
Yeah. It's definitely foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so then Snowball, being the most literate of the bunch, he goes and changes the sign at the gate
Okay.
from Manor Farm to
Okay.
Animal Farm.
Ooh, very symbolic.
Yeah, super symbolic. It's like this fresh start.
Right.
And then they paint the 7 Commandments on the barn wall, which are basically the distilled essence of animalism,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
From Old Major's speech. So number 1, whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Number 2, whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. Number 3, no animal shall wear clothes. Number 4, no animal shall sleep in a bed. Number 5, no animal shall drink alcohol. Number 6, no animal shall kill any other animal. And that big one, number 7, all animals are equal.
Wow.
I mean, these seem pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, as we look at these, do you see any potential for them to be misinterpreted or even manipulated later on?
Oh, absolutely. I think there are several that have some inherent ambiguities in them, like
Yeah.
what exactly constitutes wearing clothes,
Right.
what defines a bed,
Yeah.
and then of course you've got that really crucial one, all animals are equal, which I mean that's such a powerful statement of intent.
Yeah.
But the concept of equality itself
Right.
can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah, it all depends on who's doing the interpreting.
Exactly.
And then the chapter ends with this event that seems really small at first,
Okay.
but it actually turns out to be pretty significant.
What is it?
So the pigs take the initiative in milking the cows,
Okay.
and there are these 5 buckets of milk, all full.
Okay.
And the other animals are like, okay, what are we going to do with this milk?
Right.
And Napoleon just gives this really dismissive answer, like, oh, it'll be attended to. Don't
Okay.
you worry about it.
Yeah.
And he kind of steers everyone towards the more urgent task of the harvest.
Okay.
But when they come back in the evening, the milk has vanished.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it just disappears.
So where did it go?
We're not entirely sure yet, but it definitely feels like a sign of things to come.
Right, like a subtle but important shift.
Totally. All right, so moving on to chapter 3.
Okay.
This is where we start to see some of those initial successes of the rebellion.
Okay, good.
The animals are working incredibly hard to bring in the hay, but there's this real sense of, reward because they're doing it for themselves now.
It's theirs.
Yeah, and the harvest is actually bigger and more efficiently managed than it ever was under Jones. Yeah, there's no wastage anymore. And Boxer in particular,
Okay.
he's just this incredible force of nature. He's working like 3 animals combined.
Wow.
And he's constantly repeating these slogans, I will work harder.
Okay.
And Napoleon is always right.
The second one's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it seems admirable, right? This like total dedication.
Sure.
But do you think there's a potential downside to that kind of unquestioning loyalty?
I mean, while his work ethic is obviously, incredibly impressive,
Yeah.
that second slogan, Napoleon is always right, I think that becomes a real vulnerability for him later.
Right.
Because he doesn't seem to, think critically or question things even when maybe he should.
Yeah, he never really stops to consider if Napoleon might actually be wrong.
Exactly. And it makes him very easy to manipulate.
Yeah, and it becomes this mantra that just shuts down any kind of dissent.
Right. It's like he's preemptively silencing himself.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we also see, of course, that there are some animals who aren't quite pulling their weight. Molly is still lazy as ever, and the cat has this remarkable talent for disappearing whenever there's work to be done.
Of course.
But overall, there is this really strong feeling of unity.
Okay.
They establish these Sunday rituals.
Okay.
They hoist this green flag with a hoof and a horn on it.
Nice.
They hold meetings to discuss farm business. They sing Beasts of England.
Yeah.
And then they have the afternoon for recreation.
I mean, these rituals are so important, right?
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because they really help build that sense of community.
Right.
And a shared identity.
Yeah.
That flag and that song, they serve as these constant reminders
Totally.
of their revolution and their goals.
Yeah. And in theory, those meetings are supposed to be this platform for democratic decision-making.
Right.
So, it really should foster a sense of ownership over the farm.
Exactly. In theory.
In theory.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that happens in this chapter is that Snowball starts organizing everyone into these various animal committees, trying to improve life on the farm in different areas. But in the process, we also see how different the animals are in terms of their literacy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like the dogs learn the 7 Commandments really quickly.
Okay.
Muriel the goat can read scraps of newspaper.
Okay.
Benjamin can read as well as any pig, but he just chooses not to.
Right.
Clover learns the alphabet, but she struggles to form words.
Okay.
And poor Boxer, he never gets beyond the letter D.
Wow.
And Molly, well, she only ever learns the letters in her own name.
Oh, Molly.
Yeah, so, I mean, how do you think these disparities in literacy are going to affect things moving forward?
I think it's a huge issue, right? Because it creates this power imbalance from the start.
Yeah.
The animals who can read and write, especially the pigs, they have control over information. They can interpret the commandments.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they can shape the narrative of the entire farm.
And the other animals are kind of at their mercy?
Totally. They're
Yeah.
dependent on them for their understanding of everything that's happening.
Right, so they become much more susceptible to manipulation.
Exactly.
So then we have this kind of funny little debate over legs.
Oh, yeah.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Right.
The birds struggle with this initially because obviously they have 2 legs.
Yeah.
But Snowball manages to explain it to them.
Mm.
He's like, well, a wing is for propulsion, not manipulation, so it counts as a leg.
Okay.
And they even write this simplified maxim, like above the 7 commandments, in bigger letters so everyone can see it.
So it's like their slogan.
Yeah. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Catchy.
Very catchy. But do you think it actually encourages them to think critically, or is it more like promoting a simplistic worldview?
I think it's definitely the second one. It creates this really clear,
Right.
easily remembered distinction between them and humans,
Right.
but it doesn't allow for nuance.
Yeah.
And that kind of black and white thinking can be very dangerous.
Totally. Because later on, it's going to be so easy to twist that to justify all sorts of things. And then the chapter ends with this revelation that the pigs are taking all the milk and the windfall apples for themselves.
Oh, so that's where the milk went.
That's where the milk went.
Yeah.
And Squealer, with his like incredible gift for persuasion,
Right.
he manages to convince the other animals that the pigs need this extra nourishment for their brain work,
Oh, wow.
that, their leadership is so important to the farm's well-being.
Okay.
And he also really plays on that deep-seated fear of Jones coming back.
Oh, so fear's a big motivator.
It's a huge motivator. And I mean, this feels like a major turning point.
Yeah, it is. It's the moment where the pigs are openly putting their needs above everyone else's.
Yeah. And that fear of Jones coming back is just going to become this tool that they use over and over again.
To keep everyone in line.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so moving into Chapter 4, we start to see some external challenges emerge.
Okay.
News of Animal Farm has spread, obviously.
Right.
Mr. Jones is complaining in the local pub.
Of course.
And the neighboring farmers, Pilkington of Foxwood and Frederick of Pinchfield, they're kind of watching this all unfold with a mixture of fear and, maybe even a little bit of greed.
Oh.
Because they're secretly hoping to, maybe gain some advantage from Jones's misfortune.
Capitalize on it.
Yeah, but they are worried about this idea of animal rebellion spreading.
Okay.
So initially, they're hesitant to help Jones directly.
Right.
But they start spreading all these rumors about Animal Farm.
Like what?
Stories of cannibalism and torture.
Oh, wow.
Basically just trying to discredit the rebellion and paint the animals as like these bloodthirsty savages.
Propaganda.
Yeah, total propaganda. But how effective do you think that kind of external pressure really is?
I mean, on the one hand, it does kind of aim to undermine what they've achieved and prevent these revolutionary ideas from spreading.
Right.
But on the other hand, I think it also draws even more attention to Animal Farm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Beasts of England becomes this sort of underground anthem. Like it spreads despite their attempts to suppress it.
It's like forbidden fruit.
Totally.
So then in October, Jones and a group of other men, they actually try to retake the farm by force.
Oh, wow. So it gets violent.
Yeah, it's a full-blown battle. It's called the Battle of the Cowshed.
Oh, okay.
And the animals, bravely led by Snowball, they managed to defend their territory.
Wow, good for them.
Yeah, it's a hard-won victory.
Yeah.
A sheep is tragically killed. And Boxer actually accidentally injures a stable lad, which causes him a lot of remorse.
Right, because he doesn't want to kill.
Yeah, he's very conflicted about it, even though Snowball's just like, the only good human being is a dead one.
Right.
But ultimately, the animals are victorious, and Snowball and Boxer are declared Animal Hero First Class.
Wow, what an honor.
Yeah, and they decide to preserve Jones's gun
Okay.
as this kind of, trophy, and they fire it on the anniversary of the battle and the rebellion.
Interesting. I mean, I guess that victory must really solidify things for them?
Yeah, I think it really boosts their confidence
Yeah.
and their sense of collective identity.
Mm.
But I'm also curious about the fact that they establish these rituals like firing the gun on anniversaries.
Right.
What do you think that says about their state of mind?
I think it shows that they're trying to create their own history,
Yeah.
their own traditions, and I
Yeah.
think it also highlights how important these symbols of power and victory are becoming to them.
Right. They're replacing human symbols with
Yeah.
their own.
Exactly.
Okay, so then we move on to chapter 5,
All right.
and internal divisions start to become much more prominent.
Okay.
So Molly, as we know, she's never really been fully on board
Right.
with this whole revolution thing.
Yeah.
She's lazy. She misses the comforts of her old life.
And sugar in the ribbon.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually she just disappears.
Really?
Yeah, she's lured away by some humans who offer her, you guessed it, sugar and ribbons.
Oh, Molly.
Yeah. And most of the other animals, they kind of view this as, not a huge loss. It's like,
Right.
okay, well, she wasn't really one of us anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, like weeding out the less devoted.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, her departure feels almost inevitable, right?
It does.
Because her priorities were never really aligned with the revolution.
Yeah, she was always going to choose comfort over freedom.
Exactly. And it really highlights that not everyone who participates in a revolution is equally invested.
That's a good point.
Some are just looking for personal gain or just the continuation of familiar comforts.
Right, and they're not prepared to make real sacrifices.
Exactly.
So then the big conflict of this chapter is the one between Snowball and Napoleon,
Okay.
primarily over the idea of building a windmill.
Ah, the windmill.
Yes, the windmill. So Snowball has this incredibly ambitious vision.
Okay.
He wants to use the windmill to generate electricity, which would power the entire farm,
Wow.
making life so much easier.
Yeah.
He even talks about a 3-day work week.
Really?
Yeah, which, that really speaks to the original, promise of liberation.
Right, like freedom from toil.
Exactly.
Right.
But Napoleon, he's completely opposed to the idea.
What?
He just offers this quiet opposition at first. He claims that the windmill is going to be too complicated,
Okay.
that it'll take too long, that it'll ultimately fail, and that they should be focusing on more practical things.
So he's the voice of caution.
Yeah, but their disagreements become increasingly hostile and personal.
Okay.
They start attacking each other's ideas and their characters.
And what do you think these differing visions for the future tell us about their motivations?
I think Snowball's vision really suggests that he's focused on progress,
Okay.
innovation, actually improving the lives of all the animals.
Right.
And his focus on a shorter work week really aligns with that, that original goal of freedom.
Totally.
But Napoleon, I think his opposition is much more about power.
Okay.
He sees Snowball's popularity and his ambitious plans as a threat to his own influence.
Right. He wants to maintain control.
Exactly. So their debate culminates in this really dramatic showdown at one of the Sunday meetings. And Snowball is giving this really passionate speech about the windmill. He's got all these plans drawn up.
Okay.
And he seems to be winning over the other animals.
Right.
But then Napoleon just completely blindsides everyone.
What's he do?
He unleashes his secret weapon,
Which is?
the 9 puppies that he's been secretly raising and training in isolation.
Oh, wow. He's been playing the long game.
Yeah, total power move.
Yeah.
These dogs are huge and vicious.
Okay.
And they chase Snowball off the farm.
Wow.
I mean, just like that, all debate is silenced.
Yeah, it's a complete power grab.
It is.
Yeah.
And the other animals are obviously shocked
Right.
and dismayed by this.
Right.
But the sheep, they immediately start bleeding.
Oh, no.
There's a little mantra.
Oops.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Right, so they're just drowning out any potential dissent.
Exactly. They're like Napoleon's little cheer squad.
Wow. I mean, this really feels like the point of no return.
It does. This introduction of violence is a huge shift.
What do you think it signifies for the future?
I think it means that Animal Farm is no longer about, reason or democracy.
Right.
It's about force and control.
Napoleon's in charge now.
Napoleon is in charge. So just like that, Napoleon is in total control.
Yeah.
He immediately digs up Old Major's skull, which had been the symbol of the revolution,
Right.
and puts it on a pedestal for the animals to salute.
Okay.
The pigs move into the farmhouse harness room, establishing it as their headquarters.
Okay.
And then Squealer, with his incredible ability to twist any narrative,
Oh, Squealer.
he comes out and he convinces everyone that Napoleon had actually always supported the windmill.
What?
Yeah, and that his opposition was just a clever tactic to outmaneuver Snowball.
I mean, how does he even begin to make that sound plausible?
It's amazing, right? He uses all this complex language and logical fallacies that just completely go over the heads of the less intelligent animals.
Right.
He appeals to their fear of Jones coming back.
There's the fear again.
Yeah, constantly saying that, questioning Napoleon could put their freedom at risk.
Right.
And he also leverages the fact that their memories are really bad.
Okay.
So he can kind of subtly rewrite history to fit whatever the pig's current agenda is.
So it's like a classic case of propaganda.
Yeah, he's controlling the narrative.
Totally.
Okay, so chapters 6, 7, and 8, it's basically just this steady decline.
Oh, no.
It's really disheartening to read. The animals are working harder than ever to build the windmill,
Right.
but there are all these setbacks.
Okay.
Materials run short, the weather is terrible, and Napoleon makes this shocking decision to start trading with the neighboring human farms,
Oh, wow.
which is a direct violation of, one of the earliest and most important resolutions they made.
Huge betrayal of the original principles.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, the pigs themselves, they start living in increasing comfort,
Of course they do.
while the other animals are just, toiling away.
Right, so how do they justify this to everyone?
Well, they use that same old excuse, the threat of Jones coming back.
Right.
They say that trade is necessary to obtain essential supplies, to defend the farm, and to finish the windmill.
So it's all about security.
Yeah, they frame it as this, pragmatic necessity rather than, an ideological betrayal.
Right.
And, of course, Squealer is there to spin it all
Of course.
and convince everyone that it's actually in their best interest.
Even as the pigs are taking more and more for themselves.
Exactly.
Oh.
So then the first windmill tragically collapses in a storm,
Oh, no.
and almost immediately, Napoleon and Squealer blame it on Snowball.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. They portray him as this saboteur who's secretly working with the humans to undermine Animal Farm.
It's so convenient.
It is.
Yeah.
And this scapegoating becomes a recurring tactic.
Why is it so effective?
Well, because it diverts attention away from the pig's own mistakes
Right.
and shortcomings.
Oh.
It creates this common enemy,
Yeah.
which unites the other animals against this perceived threat.
Right, so it reinforces their dependence on Napoleon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also conveniently silences anyone.